So previously we discussed the different patterns or different variations in the primary impact injuries, and I think now it's time to study the secondary impact injuries. Like secondary impact injuries can be of different types, and the first illustration here kind of establishes the groundwork for what we are going to discuss in this slide. The thing you should bear in mind while we move on is that the person can either fall off the car, and it can or he can fall towards the car. So there are two possibilities. These possibilities can depend on the speeds at which the car is traveling, or the speeds at which the car strikes the poor victim. So there are lower speeds, medium range speeds, and high speeds. At low speeds, the usual pattern is that the person falls off the car. That is the usual pattern of secondary injuries. Secondary impact injuries. But at medium velocities or medium speeds, the poor victim stumbles, loses balance, and falls towards the car, and mostly hits the bumper and the windscreen. And at higher velocities, the poor victim kind of flies atop the roof of the car and falls behind the car upside down, i.e. head first. The head is the first part of the body that strikes the ground. Now, what speeds are considered low, what speeds are considered medium, and what ranges of speeds are considered high? So there is a range limit. And if you remember the ranges of medium speed, I think you can easily predict what speeds are low speeds and what speeds are considered higher. So the range of the medium speeds are 20 to 60 kilometers per hour, and this equals about 12 to 36 miles per hour. These are the ranges of medium speeds. Anything below that, i.e. anything below 20 kilometers per hour perhaps, will be considered low, and everything higher than 60 kilometers per hour will be considered high, and vice versa. So at lower speeds, the victim falls off, and at medium range speeds, the victim falls towards the vehicle but strikes the windscreen, and at higher speed, the poor victim flies atop the roof of the car to hit the ground behind the car. That is the usual pattern of secondary impact injuries. Now we move on to secondary injuries, and there is not much to remember about the secondary injuries except to establish just a basic concept in your hippocampus, that there can be a wide ranges of secondary injuries. Like secondary injuries are the injuries that the poor victim has to bear when he falls away from the car. Then the poor victim can be run over by another cars, or can like strike some pole or another vehicle perhaps. So there is a spectrum of possibilities. So let's see what we have in text here. Secondary injuries are often more serious, potentially lethal than the primary injuries, and such injuries can vary from simple brush abrasions. What are brush abrasions? These are the abrasions that have minimal bleeding, and there are 4 types of abrasions. I think it might confuse you a little bit if I recall them for you, but if you don't remember them, I have discussed abrasions in detail in the lectures on mechanical injuries. So such secondary injuries can vary from simple brush abrasions caused by skidding or frictioning across the surface of the road, to fractures of the skull or axial skeleton caused by direct contact with the hard surface, and there can also be hyperextension or hyperflexion of the joints. And an important point that I kind of missed rather than skipped, to be more honest, is something called a whiplash injury. What is a whiplash injury? Whiplash injury is a neck injury, and more scientifically, if we describe the neck or the joints in the neck, that would be cervical spine. So it is injury to cervical spine. And when does it happen? When the name gives you everything. What is a whip? Whip is chanta. So when the neck is moved like a whip, it can result in injury to cervical spine, which is known as whiplash injury. So what's movement like a whip? What movement is considered moving like a whip? Rapid, forceful back and forth movement. Rapid, forceful back and forth movement of the neck can result in injury to the cervical spine, which is known as whiplash injury. And in the next slide, we are going to see different pictures and different more possibilities of secondary injuries. Like there can be run over injuries, i.e. the poor victim falls off the car and another vehicle and दूसरी गाड़ी उस पे चढ़ जाए, इसको run over injuries कहते हैं. Simpler ये. Run over injuries are relatively unusual and the effects are variable depending on the area of the body involved, the weight of the vehicle, and the surface area of the contact. Run over injuries can cause disruption of the skull, or even the brain can be externalized. This can lead to rupture of the internal organs and fractures to the spine. Compression of chest may result in multiple rib fractures, and the tire can peel off the skin. The wheel may strip off large areas of skin as depicted here. This is also in past paper MCQ. And this peeling off of skin is known as flaying. So there is a wide spectrum of possibilities. The injury can be as minimal as simple tire marks to grazes or a gravel rash. It is a type of abrasion. A type of abrasion that is kind of spread along a wide area of the body as seen here. This is characteristic of road traffic accidents, and I think you can, those of you who have watched my mechanical injuries lecture, this will be just a piece of cake for you. And in more to be more severe, or to go towards the more severe outcomes of the secondary injuries, it can even cause traumatic amputations. Traumatic amputations is more characteristic of train injuries, to be more correct. Now we move on to injuries to the vehicle occupants. I think we should recall a little bit that the paradigm we previously established is that transportational injuries can be broadly categorized into injuries to pedestrians and the injuries to vehicle occupants. And the injuries to pedestrian we broadly classified again as impact injuries and non-impact injuries. And the impact injuries included things such as primary impact injuries and secondary impact. And non-impact injuries included secondary injuries. So we are done with the pedestrian half of the transportational injuries, and now it's the turn of injuries to vehicle occupants. There can be three patterns of injuries. There can be deceleration induced injuries, there can be acceleration induced injuries, or there can be rolling injuries. Like if the impact or the accident site is the front of the car, this will cause sudden deceleration, sudden stoppage, sudden reduction in the speed of the car, and this will cause deceleration associated injuries. And if the impact is on the back side of the car, like for example your car is struck by another car from near the back, so this can cause sudden acceleration of your car, sudden increase in speed of your car, and these will cause acceleration associated injuries. And if your car is struck by another car from the side, and then this can cause your car to kind of roll over the surface of the car or skid over the surface of the car. And that is quite an astonishing feature of most of the action. I hope you can all recall scenes of side impact and rolling from different action movies. Like for example, the scene I can currently recall is from Die Hard movie. I am not sure which Die Hard movie. So anyhow, that's all about the types of injuries to the patterns of injury to vehicle occupants. And this can there is also a wide spectrum. It can cause cervical spine injury, which is also known as whiplash injury. The person will continue to move forward due to inertia, and the poor victim's head and body will kind of head and face will kind of strike the windscreen. This can cause face and head injury. The steering wheel impact can cause injury to the abdomen. Similarly, there will be a reflex of the body, a reflex of the legs to hold you in position so as you do not fall into the windscreen. So the legs will kind of stiffen reflexively, and this stiffening of legs can cause leg fracture. Similarly, there can be pelvic fracture too. And here is a picture of face injury. There are abrasions and lacerations quite visible and quite characteristic of um, face and head injuries when the victim kind of falls into or kind of strikes the windscreen. That's all about the injuries to vehicle occupants, and there are some other topics mentioned in some of the reference books, like the risk factors for injuries and the risk factors for road traffic accidents, and the preventive measures for road traffic accidents. I think you can all go through that on your own, but it's not but these topics are not much related to the medical legal studies. These are more these concern community medicine more. But anyhow, the general rule is that that the road traffic accidents can occur, but there are certain risk factors like risk-taking behaviors in teenage aggression, and influence of certain narcotics and the drugs like alcohol. So driving under the influence can remarkably increase the risk for road traffic accidents. And the preventive measures include things such as the newer braking systems, the ABS braking system, the seat belts, and wearing helmet in motorcycle if you're driving motorcycle perhaps, and things like that. So you can easily establish the risk factors and the preventive measures. They are not there isn't much rocket science in there. And like usual, I haven't prepared another slide for MCQs, and that's because there aren't much MCQs concerning transportational injury in the past papers, and there are just three MCQs, and sorry, two MCQs that I can currently recall. The one is concerning the cervical spine injury, and this is known as whiplash injury. We already went through that. And another MCQ is that the primary impact injury is due to bumper, and the usual site of primary impact injury is, can you recall? Yes, it's a knee region. So, and that's all you need to know.